It's now less than 4 weeks until Election Day. For a look at the state of the campaign, money in politics, and more, let's welcome Congressman Khanna, a Democrat from California's 17th district, located in the heart of Silicon Valley. He's a surrogate for the Harris-Walz campaign. And thanks for joining us. We actually, Ro, had a congressman, I call you Ro because of Joe, Ro Joe, all the conjecture that we've had about maybe doing something. We had a minute, a moment when they weren't really sure what to do. And I think it passed us by. And now, you know, the two sides are all set in who they're. Earlier, we talked about Silicon Valley being a little bit different. It was an interesting piece. Who do you work for, the New Yorker or New York Magazine? That gentleman earlier talking about.
Charles Duhigg wrote a story for the New Yorker.
For the New Yorker. Yeah. And you have to deal with it all the time on where these tech titans are coming down, and more, or at least a few now, aren't afraid to say the T word out in Silicon Valley. But let's talk Google, because they're all sort of under your purview. Is this do you agree with the DOJ's tact here?
Not in breaking them up. I mean, you know what the biggest news?
That's a no then.
No, well, you know what the biggest news out of Google is today? They won the Nobel Prize. Two of the folks win the Nobel Prize for AI and discovering proteins. Those two people have done more than probably any politician in Congress. And, you know, AT&T, Bell Labs won 9 Nobel Prizes. Now, I am for sensible restrictions. Google shouldn't have exclusive deals with Apple. Google shouldn't privilege its products. But the idea that you would break them up, especially when ChatGPT has got over 100 million users, they're actually having the most competition today than ever before. It doesn't make sense.
And how do you think it plays? If it took years, the market always moves by the time they get around to things.
But by the time they break them up, there'll probably be some other AI company.
Which initially you would think that regulators might say, you know, in the past we've seen that by the time we enact these things, the toothpaste is out of the tube, and the market cures a lot of these monopolistic trends, right?
And have more narrow, tailored solutions. But why wouldn't you want the search profits invested in DeepMind so we can have more Nobel laureates making progress on discovering human proteins? I mean, there is a reason that Bell Labs was so successful. Now, have them not play fair and have a competition, but just this idea, break them up, to me, it doesn't make sense.
How about you up to speed on this Roblox story? We read it yesterday and couldn't believe some of the stuff we were reading.
Well, I think there needs to be regulation. I mean, you've got hundreds of millions of kids on these platforms. I had moms in my office who had lost children because of the choking challenge online, because they're getting fentanyl online. Here, of course, you've got these video games where kids are being preyed on. There's a Kids Online Safety Act. There are only 15 members of Congress on the House who are on that bill. We've got to pass that. The Senate wants to pass it.
Why is that so hard to pass? I don't understand that.
Well, this is where I do think, you know, there's partly the lobbying that the New Yorker article mentioned. But if the guy from Silicon Valley, who's not reflexively about breaking companies up, can say, let's protect our kids, let's get the Kids Online Safety Act passed. All it says is age verification. You've got a standard to protect children. You have to make sure that you're protecting against predators.
Who is pushing back on that?
Look, I think there are some tech lobbyists who are pushing back on it, and they make.
But is that coming from Roblox? Is it coming from Meta?
No.
Who is the prime mover here?
I think there are groups that are some funded by Meta, and they make arguments that I don't think hold water. They say, well, if you're LGBTQ, you need the internet. But you know what? The bullying is more for LGBTQ kids online, 3 times than it is for non-LGBTQ kids. And all the Kids Online Safety Act is saying is age verification, protect children, make sure there's a standard of harm. So I think this is a case, really, where tech lobbyists need to be defeated, and let's pass the bill.
Let's get back to, we'll talk to campaign at this point. And there are, you know, competing plans for how to not kill the goose that lays the golden egg that you love so much out in Silicon Valley. And we've had some people want to make a pretty good case, Joe Lonsdale, make a pretty good, or even Elon Musk, for a light touch on regulation and taxes for the Silicon Valley titans. Do you prefer tell me the best thing Kamala Harris is proposing to help the entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley? A 28% corporate tax rate?
Well, the best thing she's proposing is massive investments in science and technology. I mean, Silicon Valley was built on the investments made by DARPA, by NIH, by NSF. A lot of the technology was commercialized. And she's saying we've got to continue to invest in this, and we've got to invest in AI and the public research on AI.
I think the government, I guess, taxing people to raise money to give to technology or to do research is better than just getting out of the way with regulations for Silicon Valley?
Well, we need sensible regulations to protect our kids.
Okay.
To make sure, look, on an AI chat GPT, you don't want someone asking that, how do you commit suicide? Make sure there's regulation. How do you make a nuclear bomb?
Why raise the tax rate to 28 and then subsidize through the government for research and development? It just you're taking away on the one hand, and then you're adding and getting the government involved on the other. Just let them do it.
This is what we've got to
let them do it at 21%.
Because you're looking at investment that's 10 years down the line. I mean, making transformative investment and change has always been something our government has been good at. And our tax receipts are only 17% of GDP right now. In the 90s, when it was booming, it was around 20%. So this idea that we are overtaxed is just empirically not true.
But we also did have some record receipts this year, 11% revenues at the same time. The spending went up 11%, so that we're running a $2 trillion deficit. Do you think it makes sense to spend more than we're spending now and tax more to pay for it?
Let's look at where we can bring down spending. One place is to be smarter on defense. I mean, we've got all these legacy industries, 5 prime contractors. Why don't we have some of the defense tech compete? Look at the F-35. Lockheed had an exclusive contract, $1.7 trillion, cost overruns. We didn't let any of the startups compete. So let's look at areas where we can bring down costs. I'm all for that. We disagree on taxation. I want to tax some of these folks more.
Yeah, we've come up with the Khanna, or actually it's probably the Sorkin plan. I think you had it first. Taxing some of the loans.
I read his op-ed in the Times the last time you mentioned
it. Is that where you got it, or I thought you said it first?
I get all my ideas from other people. It was a reasonable plan. I said if Sorkin's for it, and
that's after you came on and said the unrealized capital gains was probably not a great position. Then you got yelled at.
Yeah, because it's not a smart position. That's not the way to go after tax.
But as a surrogate, there's a surrogate. You're not supposed to come on and disagree with what you're supposed to be saying here, Ro, right?
I represent the Valley, which is independent. One of the things in the Valley, people say, why are some people moving away from the Democratic Party? Yeah. One of the things they value is the free exchange of ideas, where you're willing to say what you believe, where you can criticize folks and not just be party line. And I think that's what built this country, this freedom of speech. I'm much more progressive than a bunch of people who support me there, but they know I'll engage.